Clear is kind. Unclear is unkind. Brene Brown. Bending Not Breaking, the Dragon Prince edition. Book 2, Episode 8, The Book of Destiny. All right, everybody, welcome back. We are approaching the end of Book 2, and once again, we are so incredibly lucky to be welcoming an amazing guest. You all may know him as Spider-Ham from Marvel Battle World, or Sans Smirk from My Little Pony, or perhaps one of his many other voices and characters. But I know that the majority of you will know Jesse Inocalla as the voice of Soren himself. Jesse is here with us today. Jesse, how has life been treating you? How are you? What's going on?
Oh, it's it's year 2 of a global pandemic, and I'm doing my best to stay alive and thriving. Hope everybody out there is safe and healthy and masking up and getting vaxxed. It's the one free thing you can do in the American healthcare system, so you might as well.
Low blow.
Hey, I gotta take them where I can get them.
Oh man.
But yeah, things have been pretty good. It's been a very chill year so far. But just always trying to move forward and trying to pay a special eye to being kind to myself in trying times.
Ooh, can you give me an example of a time in the past week or 24 hours you feel like you have been kind to yourself, and what kind of form did that take?
Oh geez. I mean, not to steal a thing from David Lynch, but there was that wonderful moment in the first season of Twin Peaks where Dale Cooper says, once a day, every day, give yourself a gift. Doesn't matter what it is, just let it happen, let it be unexpected, and just treat yourself a little bit. And for me, what that kind of translated into yesterday is my partner got hit by a bad case of heat exhaustion because of the heat waves, the heat dome that's formed here. And I was kind of, doing my best to take care of the house, take the dog out, go pick up snacks for us. And I just midway through the day, I started getting a really, really bad headache. And I've had not sleep exhaustion. Jeez, I wish I had. I've had heat exhaustion and heat stroke before. And I know that to be one of the symptoms. You start getting a really bad headache because you haven't hydrated enough. And because, you're just moving too much. And I was like, I think I need to take a moment. And I just went to go lay down, and I took like a little hour-long nap. And I woke up feeling so much better and so much more revitalized. And it's incredible just what that little reset can do for you,
Yeah. So many of us, myself included, really struggle with giving ourselves that space for our bodies to tell us that, hey, you need to rest, and then like following through with it is such a chore.
Well, it's so funny. It's something I've been thinking a lot about in the throes of COVID-19, shall we say, because we are most certainly not in the wake. I think something really interesting, and something that I think is really special that's come out of what we've all been collectively experiencing is we're starting to understand a more nuanced and more thorough approach to how we work and how we hustle and how we grind, and how like hustle culture is deeply toxic and deeply
the worst,
deeply bad for you. And like how work structures as they've been built in the Western world, really all over the world, have been made in such a way so as to not benefit the worker, so as to keep us exhausted.
Yeah.
And I just think it's really, really interesting that because, not of course all of us, because there are frontline people, food workers, everyone, but people who have had the opportunity to work at home are now being asked to come back into office spaces,
Yeah.
going like,
Yeah.
why though? Because I was doing the exact same job from here and y'all weren't having any complaints about it. And it's something that I found really interesting to see, and it's something that I hope more people wake up to.
Yeah, what you just described reminds me of the language from Brene Brown's book called Rising Strong.
Mm.
It talks about the reckoning, the rumble, and the revolution.
Mm.
And COVID-19 brought on a real strong reckoning. And we are reckoning,
yeah.
right? And so we are all reckoning with a great deal of things. And this is one of those things that we're reckoning, is like, oh my goodness, this is like an issue.
Yeah.
And
this
now
is just life now.
Yeah, and now we're rumbling with it, and now we're tossing it around, we're playing with it, we're trying to figure out the best way to handle it. And what that's going to lead to is something that's pretty revolutionary, I imagine, if people continue to speak up for at their places of work and say, hey, I do a better job from home. And that's not true for everyone. Some people do a better job at work. And I think it's just, how do we get people who are in charge and capable of making these decisions to say, you need to go where you're going to do your best work and where you are going to be your best self. And I probably should have reordered those, right? Where you are going to be your best self is most important. And that's just not necessarily the outlook of business people.
No, not particularly. I tell you, I was so shook. It sent me into an anxiety attack seeing the CDC, last month at time of recording, or the month before, saying, oh yeah, you're fine to go maskless in public spaces now.
Yikes.
Because there's variants growing right now.
Yeah.
And even where I am in Vancouver, we've got, I believe it was 80 something % of the adult population has their first shot, which is incredible.
Yeah, that's high.
But it's only the first shot still. And people are walking around, maskless and going to drum circles on the beach. And I'm just like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Guys?
Yeah.
We are literally like, I am a big proponent of collective action, as one is probably aware of from my Twitter feed.
I love it.
I just think like there's literally no way we're getting through COVID or really anything without looking out for the best of the group. Without taking care of each other, and without especially with regards to COVID, looking out for the people who can't get vaccinated.
Absolutely.
Like people who are chronically ill, or people who have, medical stuff that makes them actual medical stuff that makes them unable to
absolutely
get vaxxed. Like no one is safe until everyone is safe.
Well, and that's something that I've been kind of grappling with in my studies at school, in my master's degree programs. I've been experiencing and learning a lot of research around how the whole population is improved when we are paying attention to and caring for the most vulnerable among us.
Absolutely.
Right? There's so much data out there that suggests that when we make sure that the most extreme vulnerable case, if they are able to be taken care of, everyone benefits from that. So I am all on board with everything that you're saying, and I hope that we continue to make sure that message comes through in everything that we're doing, so that we can continue to lean on each other and build that community.
I truly hope so. It's something that has weighed so heavily on, I mean, not just me, of course, but the entire human population, that everyone that is in charge is more worried about keeping the economy running than keeping the people alive. And we even see that here in BC. We've got, our own premier has okayed the logging of ancient old growth forest, which is contributing to our heat dome.
Yeah.
Like, come on,
insult to
guy.
injury.
Yeah, and it's like I saw the math on it, and it was ridiculous. Like one of those giant ancient trees was like $30,000 worth of lumber.
Oof.
And I'm like, yo, there's better ways to make $30,000, bro.
Yeah, I could survive on one tree for a year.
Oh yeah, easy, dude.
Oh man. Okay. All right.
Anyway.
Yeah.
That's
Anyway,
enough of that.
there's so much we could just go. We could just digress for the whole time.
I have been known to do that on podcasts.
But let's dive in. So today we're talking about clarity. Clarity is our lens for this episode, and we're talking about episode 8 of season 2, book 2, if you will. The Book of Destiny, which frankly is really unclear, right? The Book of Destiny, super unclear, right? Well, at least for me. But I'm really interested to hear from you and kind of change the conversation a little bit and ask you tell me about a moment of clarity in your life, whether that be where it was sorely lacking, whether there was something that some clarity came to you and it changed the way you saw something. Can you tell me about any sort of moment along those lines?
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about this since you asked me about this, and I'm 35 now, and the pandemic has brought about a resurgence of all manner of hobbies that I left aside when I was a kid. And I through the lens of clarity, something that really struck me is that something that really made my life so much better was when I stopped caring what other people thought I was doing.
Ooh.
Because that's, through that lens of, I don't even know if you've done this one yet, but judgment, right? Like we all feel judged at all times by everything. Like I deal with anxiety, I deal with depression. Like I am constantly feeling outward pressure, which isn't actually there in many cases, but I recognize is something that I need to deal with. And the clarity that I speak of is that of just letting go and allowing myself to be my best self in spite of my previous selves, I think is a good way to phrase it.
Wow.
Because I mean, I don't know about you, Ben, but there I believe it was some famous guy who said, "Let he who is without sin cast the first stone." And there is no one in the world who is free of sin, Yeah. There is no fave that is and I'm no different. No one is any different. I did real dumb shit as a kid. I did real dumb shit in my 20s. And I look back on it, and in some cases I laugh because it was me being very stupid, just getting blackout and wandering into the night, or I don't know, other examples of dumb stuff. Or I look back and I am just frozen at the ignorance, or at the lack of clarity, shall we say.
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
I experienced in those moments. But I found it so freeing, and I guess you could call this a moment of clarity, to look back and be all like, yeah, well, you know what? That was 15 years ago. And you are the only one who remembers it. So maybe it's time to stop letting it rule your life.
Wow. No, there's so much that I thought about while you were speaking, and I'm just amazed at that kind of track, because what an honest account of the human experience that you just gave us. And I think that that's so important to hear from people, because we see it honestly in this episode, right? And not to jump ahead, but man, Soren has a pretty rough experience throughout this whole episode, throughout
this arc, dude. Throughout
fair.
Last episode, this episode, next episode is a rough time for old Sorbear.
Yeah, and it's just, honestly, what you just described really just reminded me of his experience. It's really fascinating to kind of hear you speak about that, and I'm sure that is ultimately what gave you a lot of insight into how to voice that character in these moments. Really, really, really beautiful. In kind of a dark way, if you know what I mean.
Well, I prefer it that way, so it worked out.
Yeah.
Well.
You know, one of the things that came to mind also in the way you described it, like this concept of letting go of judgment, letting go of this gremlin of comparison.
Yes.
That is similar verbiage to the way Brene Brown describes one of the wholehearted guideposts to wholehearted living in her book, The Gifts of Imperfection. You can tell how much of a Brene Brown nerd I am right now. This is
Open
what,
with
like,
it, drop a
yep,
couple quotes.
yep.
This Brene Brown, no big.
Oh yeah, but yeah, one of the guideposts is letting go of comparison so that you can cultivate creativity.
Yeah.
Because like comparison is the enemy of creativity, and you are such a creative being. Like literally, so much of what you do is surrounded by and guided by creativity that I feel a lot of clarity on the outside looking in to the experience you described, because that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. How does that resonate with you? Is that just like, this is
absolutely. It's, it's something I took a class recently with an animation teacher I've been wanting to work with for a decade easily. And I mean, because of COVID-19, he started advertising his classes online. So I was like, I'm in. This is it. I'm here.
That's awesome.
And he said something that, as an actor, I always knew, but it's one of those things where like you want it to set in, and it sat in this case, where he said, we have literally no control over our careers. We have no control over whether we book. We have no control over if what we do is what they want. We have no control over if the show that we happen to be a part of gets big. We don't know what's ever going to bite. We have no control.
Yeah.
So why not have fun with it?
Here.
And that just really struck me. And, it part of it too is it helped me further define my own artistic voice, because art is messy. Art is impolite. Art is undeniable in its works. We know art when we see it. And to be polite in your work, to be restrained in your work, to give them any reason to say, nah, that's not it, is doing yourself a disservice as an artist. And that's something I've tried to cultivate and move forward with. I mean, of course, I'm only human. I fuck up all the time. But it's been a nice guidepost and like nice like lighthouse in the dark for me to go, okay, if ever I'm falling off, just be undeniable in your work.
Yeah, I think we should just end the podcast right there, y'all. That's your that's your one-liner. Like, take that away, write that down, and that's awesome. I'm struck here. This is where I am.
Hey, that's how I felt, dude. I'm just parroting my teacher.
You know what? I heard it from you, so I'm seeing you as like the like pedestal right here. Wow, that's awesome. So one of the things that comes to mind as you kind of describe that is what is the relationship between clarity and control? And so as we kind of dive into the content of the episode, I'm interested in kind of parsing out that question. But before we do, we have a responsibility to make sure that our listeners are clear on what's going down in this episode, which means what's coming. It's time for the 30-second recap.
Here we go.
And I'm going to give you the choice. You get to go first or second. And I'm going to let you decide. What do you think?
I'm going to go first because I want to get it out of the way.
Get it out of the way. I get it. All right. Well, I'm going to hold a timer up to the screen so
Please do. I'm not even going to look at it. You just tell me when I'm done.
All right. I'll give you 30 seconds. All right. You ready?
Ready.
On your mark. Get set. Go.
Okay. Open battlefield. Soren has been struck by a dragon. He's been bounced against a rock. He no longer can walk. Claudia tries to heal him, doesn't work. They end up going to a hospital. Cut to smash cut. It's Rayla and Ezra and the other guy, and they're walking, and Callum's not feeling so hot because he was just toying around with dark magic, and he goes into a dream state where he sees the prince. He sees the king, sees Vilaz. Soren does haiku. Okay, that's
30 seconds.
I tried. I got partway through. I spent too much time on the first two scenes. Anyway.
We all do that. It's how we do it. It's how we do it.
That's how we do.
Yeah. All right. I'm gonna do the same thing, and I'm gonna give my best run, and we're gonna see what happens.
I believe in you.
All right. On my mark, get set. Here we go. So Callum's recovering from dark magic, and he's, delirious. Soren's broken, and then Claudia's broken up about it because magic's not helping. And then Viren learns Erebos' name and can't read it or write about him. And then he gets shushed in the library. And then Corvus and the princes and pledges loyalty. And Ezra's like, "Oh my God, I'm the king." And he's like really sad, and it's really bad. And then Dark Callum tries to convince Dreaming Callum that dark magic is the best way to go. And then he loses. And then Soren is paralyzed for life and confesses mission to Viren to kill the princes. And is relieved to be a poet. And then Claudia gets thrown out of the hospital and finds Ez on a banther. And Callum goes on dream journey with Velas and then drowned. That's the end.
I'm gonna say you got further than I did.
There's so much that happens in this episode. Like some of the episodes are much easier to recap than others. Yeah. This is a difficult episode to recap because there's just so much going down.
Totally.
Oh, okay. All right. So theoretically now our listeners have a better they've remembered a little bit about what's going on. Hopefully they just watched it like we did, and we are super prepared and ready to dive into now the episode content and ask questions about clarity and see what we can learn from this episode. So, Jesse.
Yes.
What is a moment of clarity in this episode that stuck out to you?
It seems out of character for me to reference a Callum moment, but here we are. It's when he says destiny is a book you write yourself. And there's a couple reasons that sticks out for me, because I remember when we were recording it, Aaron, who was there on the day, was directing Jack, and he was like, "Okay, Jack, this is the whole ethos of the show. Is destiny is a book you write yourself."
Ooh, that's good to know.
It is. I mean, the concept of the show is based on these generational cycles of violence and generational cycles of trauma. And by breaking that wheel, by breaking the assumption that humans can only do dark magic ever, Callum is doing exactly that. And he's saying to Dark Callum, destiny is a book you write yourself, because I don't need to follow what you claim is my destiny, which is to be a dark mage.
Yeah. Wow. And I think it's so interesting that this moment of clarity is in an argument with himself.
Yeah.
Right. This, like, how interesting is it that sometimes these paradigm shifting moments of clarity come from within, and I'm like, you would imagine, right, that would come from a teacher or a parent or a mentor. You would imagine that you'd be taught these things, this kind of clarity. But, it's interesting because this is a moment that comes from within. Tell me, like, what's your response to hearing and thinking about it from that perspective?
I think I like that you bring that up, because it's my opinion that, a lot of new information comes from without. It comes from teachers. It comes from parents, guardians, books, internet, whatever. But I tell actors all the time when I'm teaching them, we as human beings have built-in bullshit detectors.
Here.
We know when people are lying to us. We know when people are being untrue with us. Even to a small scale, we might go, "Oh, that doesn't seem right." And what I have come to accredit this to is the gut. This is your gut telling you, I don't know about this. And I think, ultimately in this moment, we see Callum within himself, talking to himself, almost in, I almost want to say like id versus ego.
In a way, that makes perfect sense. Sure.
A little bit of him going like, the id saying like, "No, you have to do this. This is the only way." and the ego going, hold on, no, there is another way. I will assert my own way to do this.
Yeah.
But I think it just comes from the gut. It comes from saying like, no, I know this is what is expected of me, but I also know this isn't what I want. And I am still going to achieve my goal, but I'm not going to do it your way. I'm going to do it my way. And your way in this case being the tradition of it.
Yeah. You know, I'm kind of reflecting on your original story when I asked
Sure.
you to talk about clarity, and thinking about how while while you did have this mentor give you this really beautiful experience of a narrative, the moment of clarity you spoke about was also a moment that you kind of came to on your own, right? And can you tell me a little bit about, like, I did you have a dream sequence in which you were arguing with yourself to have that moment?
I turned into the sail of a boat, and I spoke to a parrot briefly. No, I think, you know, as an actor, we have to be our own best cheerleader and our own best critic. And the critic part is really easy for all of us.
Yeah, I know that very well.
The critic part's the crazy easy one, but the cheerleader part's much, much harder. And that, I would argue, is the more important one. Because I tell you, I had an experience earlier this year where there was this series that was auditioning, and I really wanted to get on it. I was just like, I was crazy about this show. And I was in my booth, which is a closet that I've turned into a booth. And it's very, very warm in there. And I am sweating my balls off, dude. I am like dripping sweat trying to get this character right. And each time I am doing what I know to be a very good take on the character. But I went through it probably 10 times, just doing the same character, same lines, and trying like, oh, but if I change this, oh, but if I do this, oh, if I do this, it'll be different. And then I got one that I thought I was happy with. I came out of the booth. I listened to all 10 takes, functionally identical. Like, they were the same goddamn take, dude. Like, there was nothing different about him. And I just remember sitting there looking at my recording timeline and like listening back and just going like, huh. Well, because it's so easy to get in your head about shit, right?
Yeah.
And like, so a recent development for me that I'm very happy about is I have an agent in Los Angeles now, and I've been auditioning a bunch in LA, which has been really lovely. However, the first weekend I signed with them, I love them very much. Maureen and Abby over at Osprey. Abby emails me and is like, hey, I have 8 auditions for you due Monday. And I was like, okay, cool, let's go.
Is that a normal amount? Like,
no, that was quite a lot.
I was like, oh my God.
That's like, I signed with them on a Friday and they needed them by Monday. And usually like, man, like Vancouver's slow, dude. I'm getting like, 3 or maybe 3 or 4 a week if I'm lucky.
Yeah.
But I had, these 8 to do, and some of them were relatively meaty. And one, because I signed Thursday night and I came over, like I got the email Friday and they were like, yo, we need this Friday morning. I was like, cool, let's fucking go. I had no time to think about any of them. Like I of course did all my actor stuff. I was like, who am I? Where am I? What do I want? All that stuff. But I didn't have time to overthink.
Yeah.
And I just like, and this has been kind of my ethos moving forward since signing, is like, do what you need to do, but then trust the process. Trust that you know what you're doing. And that has changed my game drastically, because now, I'll audition and I'll just be like, okay, gotta go, gotta move on to the next one. Can't spend 3 hours doing 10 takes of the same 3 pages.
Yikes. Wow.
And it sounds stressful, and it is, but it's also incredibly freeing, because I no longer give myself the permission to have the time.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing from you is that through a experience in which you kind of had this new experience
Sure.
that, that changed your thought process, and you were able to move through this audition process in a completely different way.
Sure.
And through that experience, you gained new insight that created this clarity for you.
Absolutely.
And I'm curious to think about how in our brains we can do the same thing. And sometimes it happens in an unconscious way via a dream. Sometimes it happens through a mode of experience over a long period of time. And sometimes it happens in our brain because we take time to process. And everybody's different, right? Everybody has a different processing point. And the reason I lift that up is because I think that this moment that we're seeing in Callum's brain here in his dream it has been catalyzed by this moment of dark magic. It has thrown him into this exhaustive state. But I also think that what makes Callum able to withstand, quote, dark Callum in this moment is this series of events with Rayla and Ezrin and Lujane leading up to this moment, and Claudia, and seeing Viren and seeing all these moments. I think that's what gives him the capacity to have this dream in the first place. And so I think the reason I lift that up is because I think sometimes we attribute clarity to this one single event when really all of our history is playing into that as well. Like our intuition,
absolutely.
right?
Yes.
Our intuition is built off of our experiences. So I think that's kind of, I heard that in your story, as well as I'm seeing that in Callum's experience too. And so I thought that was neat.
No, I think that's I think that's a really salient point. I mean, I don't think there really is, there's rarely, if ever, like the one big moment where you're like, oh, I get it now.
This is the moment.
Yeah. Like 99% of the time, it's a culmination of small things that have led you to the point to go like, oh, hold on. This is not what I thought it was.
Well, and I think the problem is that it dawns on you as if it were this clarifying moment.
Sure.
When really it's not. It's this series of events that we're forgetting about.
In reality, it's a culmination of all of your experiences as a human being up to that point. It's our
failures.
Failures. Yeah. It's everything you've ever done up to that point where you have been, I don't know, say you were bullied in school for wearing colorful clothes, say.
Mm-hmm.
And so you spend the rest of your life just dressing really, really drab because, those early formative experiences make you go, I can't wear that. That's not proper. But then you try on purple socks and you like them and you go, but this seems like too much color. But then for whatever reason, you feel the urge to wear them out in public and no one cares. No one's making fun of you. No one's noticing. It's just for you and you're having a really wonderful time. So maybe then you're like, oh, this worked. What if I try like a green t-shirt or something? And it slowly builds. It's like every little tiny bit helps, right? We can never, I think something that is commonly thought of, but rarely, if ever, happens, is that one big moment where we go, I'm fine to do anything ever.
Yeah.
Because that's not logical. That's not logically consistent.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's really big, deep formative things in us that would prevent us from just loudly declaring like, no, this is it. This is what I'm doing now. No consequences, no fear. Because there's always fear and there's always consequences.
Yeah.
Even if they're personal consequences,
This is fat. I'm thinking of like 17 different metaphors at once, and it's a problem because my brain is getting sidetracked.
Sure.
One of the things that I think will connect to another scene is, I wear glasses, and I'm not wearing them now, but I normally wear glasses. And what happened was I had perfect vision up until I didn't. And it's one of those things where I didn't notice the slow change until one day when I realized, oh, I can't read what's on the board when I sit in the back of the classroom.
Yeah.
And that was a moment of clarity for me because there was this realization. But I think what happens is all of these moments in these micro changes that I'm either ignorant towards or not observant enough to pay attention to and notice that I was still becoming blind. Right? And it wasn't until there was that moment where, oh, I can't see as well, that I started to really pay attention and notice that I needed glasses.
Yeah.
And I think that speaking of all of these, paradigmatic shifts in the world, like many people have been coming to grips with the fact that they've been blind for a long time.
Yeah.
And finally they've had, momentous things that throw that into sharp relief. And I find that really interesting because I want to connect this to Ezran.
Sure.
Ezran finds out that he is the new king of Catullus.
Yes.
And there is this moment of clarity when Corvus says, I come to serve the king, and he bows to Ezran. And Ezran's like, no, I'm not the king. I'm the prince. He's like, oh. And then he realizes, but here's the deal. Immediately after that, he gets mad at Rayla because I should have known, because that second wristband fell off. And like you notice that he pulls out all of these details from that he's been cataloging and not listening to over time.
Yeah.
But it took this moment for that to become clear.
Yeah.
And what's your response and reflection on that? Tell me about it.
I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is that old adage of like, a frog in a pot never knows it's boiled till it's boiled, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yikes.
there's all these there's all these little red flags that pop up where you're like, oh, hold on, oh, but that's fine, oh, that's fine, oh, that's fine. And it's like, are you familiar with Manufacturing Consent by I believe Chomsky wrote it?
I don't know. Tell me more.
It's a book basically stating the core function of it is that news media, even just the way we are born and grow, allow powerful, like say the government or say the military, to manufacture consent for actions that they do.
Okay.
So for example, you might say that oh god, it's a horrible example, but bear with me. Because unhoused people are drug addicts, their lives are meaningless because drugs are bad. Therefore, anyone who uses drugs is bad. Therefore, unhoused people are bad, and they don't deserve homes. And what that does, because like, I don't know about you, but when I grew up, I was like inundated with anti-drug propaganda. I was inundated with
DARE.
Yeah, DARE, totally. I was inundated with, winners don't use drugs, all that shit. And like, I don't care if people use drugs, like whatever, it's their own choice, it's their own body, it's their own lives. But for the longest time, I had such a deeply held stigma against drug users.
Yeah.
Which is shitty, incredibly shitty, because they're just people like any one of us. They just, like to get high or whatever. And it's all those little things that led up to that point that I wasn't even aware of.
Yes.
I didn't see DARE for the propaganda campaign it was. I didn't see the splash screens on arcades that said winners don't use drugs as propaganda. I just saw that as me going, oh, that seems fun. Okay, sure. I just started
unconscious messaging. I'm just soaking in,
internalize it.
Yeah.
And it's so funny. I was looking at I was scrolling through Twitter this morning, and as we do. Oh boy, too much of it sometimes. But I saw a piece from a children's book that was posted by someone, just in terms of like the caption said like, in any other country we would recognize this as propaganda. And it was this child with his thumbs up, little toe-headed kid smiling with a little speech bubble saying capitalism is great. And underneath was like capitalism, socialism, communism, and communism was red and socialism was like orange or yellow, which of course we associate with wait, hold on, let's think about this. And capitalism was green, which we associate with go. And capitalism was like breeds innovation, values the individual, all this shit, and on the opposite end of the spectrum with like socialism, communism, it was like values the needs of many over the individual. Ooh, bad. Encourages corruption. Bad. And I'm like, yo, like, oh, okay, dude, we get it. But the fact that there are children, literal children, because that's who that was marketed towards, looking at that and going, oh, okay, so this one is good because this is individualism. This is strong. This is proud, right? And these ones are bad because we have to care about people that aren't ourselves. Like, the amount of red flags in there would build a factory.
Yes.
And it's all those little things that just that creep into our brains that we ignore, or we just purposefully put out of our brains, or we don't even understand or being absorbed into our brains.
And it comes down to so much, not because it's not just children's books, right?
No,
it's also,
absolutely not.
It has everything to do with where we shop, how we shop,
sure,
where we spend our money. Every single dollar we spend is voting somehow, some way.
Absolutely.
And I think that there's so much out there that is, gently caressing our mind into going a certain way, and it goes unnoticed, right? Because we're blind to it. And I think that one of the goals of this podcast has been to slowly increase personal awareness, right, around not just the media that we're intaking, but also like being critical of
being literal.
Yeah.
Being critical of the media there's nothing wrong with being critical of media we enjoy.
Absolutely.
At all. That just shows we enjoy it enough
right?
to have a discussion about it.
Well, feedback is a function of respect. If I respect the media that I'm viewing, I'm going to be critical of it, right? It's just, and not necessarily critical in a bad way, but critical in a critical way.
Thinking way, yeah.
Yeah, that's a better way to say that, in a thinking way. Okay. All right. So we've talked about a little bit about Callum. We've talked a little bit about Ezrin. Tell me, what's another moment of clarity for you? And if not yours, I have several.
I mean, the moment of clarity that I always come back to in this episode is Soren simply saying, like, he can't hurt anyone anymore.
Oh, it's like such a sad moment. It's like, oh my goodness.
Heartbreaking, but I think it's such a really lovely moment, especially after the events of the previous episode, where
you can just feel the burden coming off of his shoulders.
Yeah.
It's just, oh my goodness.
Really, really can. And, the whole relationship that he has with Viren from that point on.
Yeah.
He's so different and I mean, of course it escalates in season 3. No spoilers, of course, for those of you who haven't watched it, but watch it anyway.
Yeah, what are you doing if you haven't watched it? Like, go watch it now.
You're living under a rock. It's such a really beautiful moment because, Soren, up until this point, I think in the show, in a lot of ways, has been kind of a sweet dope. He's been a sweet, dopey little puppy who has these grand designs on being a hero.
Yeah, barks a few times when he shouldn't.
Yeah, and I've always said he always means well. It's just he, especially in the first 2 seasons, really, really doesn't know what that way is.
Yeah,
and I don't know if that's because of Viren or Claudia. I don't even think that's because of. Sorry, go ahead, Ben.
You know what? I think it goes back to exactly what we were just talking about. I think he's been growing up blind because he's been indoctrinated into Viren's way of seeing the world.
Sure. Well, and not even Viren's, the entire human kingdom.
Yeah.
Because, everyone's like, ooh, elves bad, magic bad, magic not good, dragon scary, kill it. Like, of course, that's what he thinks is the heroic thing to do.
Yeah.
Because that's what is the heroic thing to do in the mind of, a human living in Catullus. Yes, I was trying to remember the name of the continent, but it's not happening.
I don't know. I don't know either.
Yeah, I don't have the map. I want the map, but I ran out of time. Didn't buy it in time. But yeah, he of course thinks this way because that's what humans think. That's what they've been programmed to think. That's what all of the propaganda leading to that point says. And like, you'd be foolish to say that it's not propaganda. I know that there are people out there who get like kind of cagey to use the word.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is everything is.
Everything.
Literally everything, and no one's immune to it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm super on board. So I had a question, and it's about this moment where Soren like starts saying, no, I'm okay with it. I'm actually going to become a poet, and here's my first poem. And I think one of the takeaways I'm realizing from this is that how serious life events can throw into sharp relief how the way that we have been living up to this point is not how we want to continue to live.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. It's some people call it a midlife crisis. Some people call it it's like whatever it may be, there's a paradigm shift where like it's no longer worth living this way.
Yeah.
And Soren, I hesitate to say he has it easy, but he certainly has the choice and the element of having to grapple with that removed because it happens to him rather than something that he chooses. But I am curious about I had never questioned whether Soren was being, sincere in that moment until I watched it with this lens, because I totally was like, this is so in character. He has always wanted to be creative. This is something that he's like never had because he's always had to be the fighter. He's always had to do the workout. But then in this moment, I was like, oh my goodness, is he just trying to console Claudia? And I have to know, what are your thoughts on that moment?
I've thought about this a fair bit.
I bet.
Yeah, I mean, even performing it, I mean, of course, I thought about it a lot. To be honest with you, my very, very first thought when I saw the, I'm going to be a poet, Claudes, was my mind flashed to George Costanza on Seinfeld. Been like, Jerry, I'm going to do it. But that's just, me making an offhand joke in my head. I think this is my headcanon. I think he's being like 80% sincere, 20% consoling Claudia.
So I like that you didn't, subscribe to my binary there. Thank you for showing us that it's not always a binary.
That never is. Yeah, I don't think, because I mean, he cares so much about his sister. His sister, his family is his whole world, and like it can be crushing to see someone that we really love go through something terrible, even if that something terrible is happening to us. And it's only natural that we want to be like, no, it's okay. I'll be fine. I remember when I was a kid, my mom was in a really bad car accident, and I was like 11 at the time. And she got into a 5-car pileup that killed the 3 drivers leading up to her car.
Oh,
so it was close. She was unable to walk for a while, and it was rough. It was really rough for the family. And she put on a brave face through the entire thing. Well up until I was in my teens, when she started being a little more open with her emotions and her feelings on it. But that sort of strength, especially in the face of myself at 11 and my brother who was 7 at the time, like we were so shook by the events of what had happened. But she's even told me to this day, like, she didn't want myself or my brother to be super panicked or super worried about it, because she didn't want to derail our lives. And like, it seems crazy to say that, because
It's
of
such a
course our
burden.
lives were derailed.
Yeah, what a burden that is to have on your shoulders.
Right? Incredibly
Yeah.
so. And I understand, because at 11 and certainly at 7 for my brother, I don't know. I don't know how he would have reacted.
Yeah.
But, at the same time, speaking of episode 8 specifically, like, there's no going back.
Yeah.
At this point, there's no going back, and it's accepting a completely different shift to a completely different life. And I think there's a lot of truth in what Soren's saying, that he wants to do, poetry and make tea and have people come and listen to him, because, he can't hurt anyone anymore. And that line always sticks with me, because
I know.
not only because it's sad though, but because it's it's true.
Yeah, no, that's I think don't misunderstand that.
Yeah,
that noise. That was like I know that in my bones. That's like his true values coming out in that moment, right?
Sure.
Where it's like, this is what I really want, is to not hurt people. And that was just like, that's what I want for him, is to be his most authentic self, right?
He wants to be the hero, and heroes don't hurt people. Heroes save people.
Yes. Clarity. I feel clarity on this issue. Yeah. So yeah, I think one of the things that happens, in the Jewish tradition, there's a asking a question is in the style of a havruta, which is when you ask a question and you provide your own answer, and then you ask someone else and hear their answer. And the idea is that the truth lies somewhere in between.
Interesting.
And I think that what your answer alone did was give us the in between, right? It showed us that, yeah, you can be both really sincere with that and also be trying to console. And so it reminded me of that practice. So I thank you for not falling into the trap of a binary. That's just really so important. Okay, we have to spend some time on Viren and Erebos.
I believe we do, yeah.
There's really no way around it.
I regret to inform you, it's Erebos time.
Yeah, so like the fact that Homeboy goes, "I would never lie," like I sit there and go, like, there's no way that anyone believes you. like does anyone? I mean,
with a voice like that, I believe him.
My God, like what a sexy voice. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Oh, Eric.
Yeah. Yes. And it's just like that the first time you hear the voice, everybody's jaw just drops. It's just like, whoa. And this is the first episode where we really get to like hear him continue to speak. And this I would never lie is unreal, because I'm sitting there going like, tee. and Viren mistrusts him. Like, it seems like there is this mistrust. He's like, no, give me your name, right? This is the deal. And so my original question coming off of the recap, I think, was something along the lines of, what's the relationship between control and clarity?
Yes.
And I think we can ask that question here. So when Viren is asking for Erebos's name, and Erebos is like, it won't make any sense to you anyway. It doesn't matter, right? And Viren's like, no, you will give me your name. And I feel like that is an attempt at gaining some control over this issue, right? Mm-hmm. Because being in the dark, being unable to have that clarity of purpose, seems like there is also a lack of control. Does that resonate with you too, or do you see it differently?
I think so. I think the whole deal with the mirror up until this point is Viren has been trying to do everything possible to make something happen, and then all of a sudden this sexy celestial elf appears out of it, and Viren is no longer the cat with the mouse. He is the mouse.
Yeah. And he's trying so hard to to stay that cat, right?
Bless him, he's trying. But yeah, I don't think, because I mean, I don't misbelieve Erebos. I don't think his name ultimately matters a whole lot to what their relationship will become.
Yeah. I agree with that. I think about, if I put these two scenes next to each other, where Soren gains this clarity through this really traumatic incident that happens to him.
Mm-hmm.
And Viren is struggling so hard to gain clarity by learning as much as possible.
Yeah.
And it seems like, when I ask about who is more in control here, it seems like, despite Soren's inability to move, I would say he's in more control of himself at this moment than he has been the entire series up to this point.
I agree.
And
I for sure agree.
And then I would say Viren has the least amount of control at this point in the series.
Absolutely.
And it's just interesting to put those next to each other and say, like, at what point, like, what is the relationship? Is it that clarity, is it that they are, like, they're usually near each other but not necessarily connected? Or is it no, like, you need clarity in order to be in control? And that makes me sound, I don't know how I feel about that. How do you feel about that? What are your thoughts?
I think with regards to what you're saying, with, Viren being entirely out of control but seeking that clarity so he may then regain control, like, Jason, who plays Viren, has said some stuff that I really, really love about Viren. First and foremost, that Viren is very, like, blinders on, single-minded, forest for the trees. He'll see the direct thing in front of him and say, this is the thing we need to deal with, but he might not see the ramifications down the line. And I don't necessarily mean to say that he's purposefully short-sighted, because I don't think he is. I just think he's a very results-oriented sort of guy.
Yeah, that makes sense.
He wants to get results done, and much in the way of many of us, really, when something is out of our control or out of our grasp, what's the first instinct we have? We seek to learn. We seek to learn everything we can about it in order to analyze it and therefore find a solution to it.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Ben.
I was going to say, this is the whole reason I'm in school right now, is because I'm trying to gain control of my life.
Good luck.
That's why I'm going to school, to learn more about trauma and mental health and spirituality, because these are all the things that I have no control over in my life.
Weird how that works. Welcome to Bending Not Breaking. This podcast about Ben.
Yeah, podcast about me being a cliche. Yikes. Anyway,
but yeah, I think that's ultimately it. Like, the human instinct is to learn. The human instinct is to gain as much information and knowledge as we can about everything possible, in order for that to best serve us in dealing with the issues we face. And Erebos has all the answers.
Yeah,
he doesn't need to gain any clarity at all, because he's like, bitch, I know.
He has so much clarity about, like, okay, I finally have a tool. I'm going to use it to its full potential. He's been planning this for however long, centuries.
However long. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Be old. Yeah. But there is a lot of clarity that can be gained from, speaking back to what happens with Soren. There's a lot of clarity that can be gained from, like, realizing the impact of your actions, which Viren has not yet come to grips with.
Yeah.
Because everything Viren does for the kingdom. And the kingdom is still in a weird place, and he's still in the throes of trying to make stuff happen for the good of the kingdom and for the good of humanity, because that's Viren's whole thing. And, I agree with Jason to a point that I don't think that Viren acts selfishly often. He does. He for sure does towards, in many parts of the show. But Viren is duty bound.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting how, and so the way that I kind of think about it is sometimes we lie to ourselves in a very compelling way about what is our duty and what is not, and how we can talk ourselves into a self-serving narrative that also happens to serve the greater good, if you will. But yeah, I think that there's a lot to be said about Viren, period.
No, but I agree, like, because that's again, like, harkening back to manufacturing consent. We give ourselves these narratives in order to do things. When we enlist in the army, say, we are given permission to shoot and kill, to take lives, and we're told the reason we do that is to maintain our freedom or to protect our interests abroad, or because they're the bad guys. But not to sound too cliched about it, but who are we to them?
Yeah. Okay, that was repetitive. So I think, do you have another moment of clarity before I offer one, or we?
You go for it. I've been offering a whole lot of them.
No, I love. They've all been very wonderful. They've been very helpful. I am learning a lot about clarity right now, so this is kind of helpful for me. So I think the moment that I want to point to next has to do with Rayla.
Sure.
And it goes back to what we've already talked about with Ezran. It's so this moment that Ezran learns that he is the king and that Harrow is passed. It's interesting to talk about the language that Rayla uses and how Ezran reacts to it. So he, like, the way she words it is, she says that must have been when he fell, when he references the bracelet falling off of her wrist. And then he gets really mad and says, no,
rightly so.
He didn't fall. He got killed.
Yeah.
And he, puts language to it that makes it more real, more honest, more true. And that kind of brought me back to this idea that clarity is more kind than being nice or beating around the bush or saying things to soften the blow.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious do you have an experience where that has been true for you, or like, what are your thoughts on this?
I mean, I agree wholeheartedly. I think that there is so much more kindness and so much more growth to be had from just being completely honest about what's going on. I mean, speaking to my own career, as I was saying earlier in the episode, we are completely out of control for the longest time. And this is like every acting school does this, and it's not out of malice. It's just what life is. They're like, oh yeah, if you do X, Y, and Z, you can get the part. You can get in there. You can do this. You can do this. You book this. You're going to go on to this, this, and this. And that's just not true. Because everyone's career is different. Everyone's path is different. And, the same opportunities don't happen for everybody. Yeah. Because it's a mixture of pure luck. It's luck and skill and opportunity and privilege in a lot of cases. I have not I have not experienced the same things as an actor of color that, say, some of my white colleagues may have experienced. That's not to say their experience is less valid than mine. It's certainly not. But my experience is different from theirs because of all sorts of extenuating circumstances. And of course, that's not me making excuses at all. That's just me, kind of speaking on it. But hearkening back to my acting school point, we are told there's so many ways that we're going to do this. We're going to succeed doing this, this, and this, And speaking to Vancouver specifically, I'll share something my agent told me that I fucking loved. I'm so happy she told me this. because she sends me clients to coach once in a while, and we were chatting on the phone because we have a very, very congenial relationship. She was like, I fucking wish these acting coaches in Vancouver would start training actors for the roles they're going to be auditioning for here. And I was like, T, what do you mean? And she said, well, they keep prepping them for, leads and guest stars and all this stuff. And she was like, Jesse, do you want to know the percentages? And I was like, absolutely, T. I want to know everything.
Give me the deets. Yeah.
She did the math that Vancouver-wise, shows that shoot in Vancouver, it's like 0.003% chance that as a Vancouver actor, you are going to book a series lead or guest lead on an American show that's shooting here.
Wow. That's so small.
It's tiny. It's infinitesimal. It is. That's why I say it's so luck oriented.
Yeah.
And she was saying, I really wish that, these acting coaches would prep actors on doing one-liners, on doing day players, on doing the technician roles, the bouncer roles, all this stuff that they're actually going to be booking. And, I have thought about that every day of my life since she said that. Because that's just, that's true. Yeah. I have been auditioning on camera for more on-camera work in the past year than I have in my entire career. And that's partially been because now self-tapes are open and I can just stand in front of my white door and take a video and send it in. But the percentage of those roles that have been, non-speaking sometimes, or a single line or two lines or three lines, probably three lines tops, has been, I want to say, like 80% of the work I've auditioned for.
Wow.
And, even in the bigger ones, it's maybe like 5 lines. But, the series, the guest stars, the series leads. I haven't auditioned for a series lead in on camera. No, twice in my career.
Dang.
And it's something that I really, really wish that, like, I had been made more aware of. Because, like, I'm not mad at it. I don't care. I don't care if I'm not going to be on CSI Vancouver or whatever. I don't want to be on CSI Vancouver. But I would love to have had that knowledge of, like, yeah, this is the truth. This is what's happening. This is how the industry in Vancouver works. Be prepared for it.
Yeah. That's interesting because a lot of people get into acting for that dream role, right?
Sure.
That's what the whole point is, that you want that. But yeah, I think that's interesting that that percentage is just woof.
It's tiny. Well, and I tell folk all the time, like, if you stick to this, you're gonna get somewhere. I don't know where that somewhere is.
Yeah.
Because that could be, maybe you find success doing audiobooks for a living. Maybe you find success doing, I have a very, very good friend who is a social media manager by day and does like a couple voice acting gigs here and there, and she loves it. That's what she wants to be doing.
That's awesome.
Like, she would much rather be doing voice acting as like a side thing than as a main career thrust. Yeah, it's like, you never, ever, ever know where you're going to end up. But if you keep at it, you're going to find something. I don't know what it is, but something will happen.
Yeah. And I guess it's just letting go of expectations and, like in becoming, gaining clarity around what expectations are appropriate, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's such a big part
of it. Oof. Okay. Well, how about this? Let's take a short musical interlude to think about our next segment, and we'll be back in just a moment. right, everyone, welcome back. I hope that musical interlude entertained you for a short while. We are back and ready to dive into our Lens MVP. And just to remind everyone what that is, the Lens MVP is we are both going to choose a character that we think deserves the Lens MVP award. So the character who, for this week, has the most clarity or provides the most clarity to someone else. You can make the argument however you want regarding who and how and why they're related to clarity, but we are going to pick someone that has the most of it. And so, Jesse, are you interested in rolling first, or do you want to roll second with who we think we want to nominate for this award? Very prestigious.
So prestigious. The trophy's in the mail. I'll go first.
All right, let's hear it.
I think my clarity MVP of the day is
dun dun dun.
I think it's Soren. Plainly, I think just that moment of
nepotism.
Of him, yeah, well, it is partially. I think just that wonderful little moment of him in the hospital bed being like, you know what, this is what I'm going to do. This is my life now. And, I was listening to Viren because Viren's smart, and I thought he was right. And turns out maybe he wasn't so right.
Yeah.
I think that to me, at least, was the most impactful, because probably I did it.
Oh, man. Okay.
I have a really close second runner-up, though, and I want to see it. Let's see if you get it.
So I'm waffling between two right now.
Okay.
I'm waffling. I'll tell you who I'm waffling between. I'm waffling between Callum and Erebos.
Okay.
Which are two very different.
I'm going to tell you right now. You've got.
I've got one of them. I've got one of them.
I'm not going to tell you who, but.
Okay. So if I'm going true to the award in the nomination here,
yeah,
and who's like the king of the crop, I'm going to go with Erebos.
Okay.
And the reason I'm picking Erebos is Erebos has all of the details, and in the sense that one of the things I admire about what clarity provides people is often clarity provides a sense of calm. And if we look back at all the characters who have clarity, like Soren, super calm. Like, he has come to this awareness, and he's not yelling, he's not throwing things, not that he can, but when you go to Viren, he's like raising his voice, he's getting angry, there's this lack of clarity. I think the exception that proves the rule is Ezrin, who gets mad when he learns this information, but then the first thing he does is says, I need to go on a walk, and I need to learn and process and reflect on this. And so Erebos is super calm, and he has a purpose. He knows what he wants. He's walking Viren into his trap every step of the way, and doing so with a smile on his face. And so I think there's just so much clarity around his intentions from his perspective, not necessarily ours. And maybe that's being generous, but that's my thought process.
That's a solid thought process. My second was Callum.
Yeah.
If only for Destiny is a book you write yourself.
Yeah.
But your reasoning behind Erebos, solid. Respect.
So we've been doing a fun little thing on Instagram and on Twitter where we are putting up a poll. Oh. And we're you versus me, Jesse. We are going against each other here.
Okay.
So our listeners and our people that follow us on the social medias, whether they listen to the podcast or not, are going to vote and decide. Also, and we're going to find out who wins between Erebos and between Soren on who deserves the Lens MVP award. Okay. So be prepared. It will come out either the day of or the next day, depending upon, whether I feel up to posting it that day. But it'll come out after it comes out shortly. And I'll make sure you're tagged in that so you can check it out. Maybe you shouldn't vote. Maybe I shouldn't tag you.
Yeah,
I would. Okay. Anyway, here we are. So that brings us to our final segment, which is that of gratitude. And gratitude is a chance for us to pick a character who has given us something, whether they have given us something to think about, whether they've taught us a lesson, whether they have just been super cool and you just admire them and you have a friend crush, whatever it may be, whatever you're grateful for. So once again, I'm going to give you the invitation. Are you interested?
You go first on this one. I went first last time.
Oh, okay. My turn. Okay. In that case, I am going to pick Callum here. Sure. So Callum, for many of the reasons that I probably would have said for him to win the Lens MVP award, is that he is going through so much struggle here, and it's struggle in a very literal physical sense, but also in a very, like, he's been struggling this whole season trying to figure out how to grapple with learning magic and grapple with all these things. And I really admire that in this moment where he is tested, he is able to say, this is the Book of Destiny is one that I write, right? It's just like, I think that moment is really powerful, and you see Dark Callum just dissolve, and then he's able to go on this spiritual journey on the sea on a boat. And I really admire that moment of being able to say no thank you to something that we're tempted to. And not that I think oftentimes we're tempted to do things that we should totally allow ourselves to do, that we say no to. But I think in this case, it's just a really beautiful thing that he's able to resist that and stand his ground and be what he's been committing to for this whole season, and stand up to it. And so that's why I am grateful for Callum.
You know what? Not to piggyback too hard, but I was going to say the same. Callum's
cheater.
I know. Callum's moment, just again, Destiny is a book you write yourself. Like that's the show. That's probably the most important thing he could have said in the entire thing, not only for his own growth, but to define like it's the thesis statement for what we see in the show with the experiences of everybody, and dealing with the generational trauma and the generational wounds, and trying to break the wheel of generational violence.
Yeah. Which is what we're all trying to do. Maybe not all of us, but
I hope
I'm trying to do it. Man. Wow. Okay. What a cool episode this has been. I feel like I've learned so much from talking with you, Jesse, and from grappling with this lens and this episode. It's just what a lot this has given us. So, Jesse, we are nearing the end of our time, and I want people who want to be able to follow you and know where to find you to be able to do so, if that is something that you so choose. So sure. if you want people to, send you gift cards and things like that, how might they contact you?
Gift cards, hell yeah.
Now we're talking.
Follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Inocalla. That's JINOCALLA. I post about projects that I'm involved in there. This has been a joy, Ben. Thank you so much for having me back.
It has been a pleasure. I've been trying not to say it's been my pleasure, because it's like we can both have pleasure from this. This is okay.
Fine.
Yeah. So that's a wrap. Jesse, thank you so much for blessing us with your time. And for everybody else, remember, you can find us at BNB_pod. And you can also email us at thearkofe@gmail.com. Find us on all the social medias, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, all the things. And we look forward to hearing from you. And until next time, be well and do good.